All right. Welcome everyone to our Resource YYC Lunch and Learn. So that you're aware, Resource YYC is a co-working community geared to professionals. We offer our lunch and learn sessions as a means for our community to network and provide meaningful learning opportunities. We also provide private office spaces, dedicated desks, day drop-ins, and virtual office options. If you are not yet a member with us, we encourage you to check out our website and follow us on social media. Links are posted in the chat. Today we have Jane Chamberlain and Sheila Carruthers, who are professional communicators and educators. Over to you, ladies.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Rose.
Rosemary.
Yeah,
And you
great.
should mention, sorry, Jane, I was just going to say you should mention that today Resource YYC reopened.
Back on campus downtown. So thanks for coming, everyone. Really great to see you here, and we're looking forward to the session. Just before we get started, feel free to, we're not going to do formal introductions over Zoom, but we'll just get you to introduce yourself in the chat bar if you don't mind. So feel free to type in your name and just what you do in the chat bar. But we'll just introduce ourselves. So I'm Jane Chamberlain, as Rose mentioned. I'm an educator, coach, and communicator. I specialize in empathetic communications training. I'm certified in emotional intelligence analysis as well. And I teach at SAIT and at the University of Calgary. And I do a lot of professional writing as well. And one of my research emphasis when I was at U of C doing my PhD was in empathy across cultural borders. So that's me.
And I'm Sheila Carruthers. I'm a management consultant, educator, and a communicator. And I specialize in building capacity and in integrating social value into the work that you do through corporate social responsibility, sustainability, ESG, environment, social governance. I specialize in conducting analysis on and then conducting change and project management, business strategic plans. Love digging into governance issues in nonprofits and ethical practices, and indeed on following the standards, the global standards on consulting competencies. So Jane and I both use a number of analysis tools, and in fact we're going to be referencing one or two of them today, such as the ones that we've listed on here on organizational excellence, which means that it's an assessment of the entire organization. I use a continuum tool for assessing corporate social responsibility. Jane mentioned about her emotional intelligence analysis that she uses, and we're both using a tool called MirrorMirror that we will mention today because of its excellent use in teamwork. Over to you, Jane.
Okay. And yes, both of us work with a team called AbFab, which, and I think we have got one of our other members here today. So we're very excited to be working in a consulting basis on AbFab as well. All right, so let's dig into this idea of team alignment. I suspect that some of you might be able to relate to this, but sometimes when you're working in a team, it can feel like you're kind of making your way in the fog, and it can be hard to achieve that common goal together because of this sense of fogginess. And we're going to talk about what that means. Okay. And especially in 2021, there is this increasing sense that teams are becoming very diverse and also dispersed. Of course, with the pandemic, we're working virtually, and we're sometimes very far away, and there's just a huge variety of perspectives that are brought into the workplace. And so when we talk about alignment, what Sheila and I are really talking about is not so much asking everyone to think in the same way and think the same thoughts and have the same opinions. It's more about building bridges between people who are fundamentally different and who have different perspectives. And today we're going to dive into the idea of diversity and inclusion, which is one of the key components of team alignment. And we're going to give you a chance to do an active exercise on inclusivity and diversity, and we're going to tie that into perspective.
So we're going to start by talking about what is team alignment. You can probably think of other words, but here's a few words that people have said to us when we have asked them to describe what teamwork means to them. And MirrorMirror, the tool that we're referencing, its definition of alignment is when all forces move in the same direction. So I'll move right on. Typical team challenges that could be a culture of mistrust. Patrick Lencioni's research on team dysfunctions highlights where that can come from. And the improvement can start with acceptance that there are challenges. And once you have accepted that, a willingness to address those challenges. And there can often be conflicting perspectives where people are refusing to listen to others, or anti-team behavior, such as people having a personal agenda that is conflicting with the team's agenda. So these are some of the typical alignment challenges, and misalignment can result out of that. It's often a conflict of some kind, and out of the fog that's caused by misalignment can come conflicting interpretations of the data that you're working with, the situations you're in, or the people. And such conflicts can be major or minor. They could be significant, or they could be really subtle, or they could be visible, or they could be, like the fog, almost invisible. So there's research that was completed by Box and Platts back in 2005, where they coined this phrase of the fog of misalignment, and they classified what often gets lost in the fog, such as these words: misinterpretation, assumptions, ambiguity, influences, biases, and information gaps. And these are just to name but a few. So our bottom line message here is that the impact of even minor misalignment can completely derail a team. So before we go any further, we'd really like to ask you what kind of misalignments you might have experienced, and have you had a time when you felt like your team was not all on the same page for its purpose or its goals or its strategies, and how to proceed? So what kind of misalignments have you experienced? We'd love if you can put it in the chat, or if you're brave enough to go off mute and let us know, we'd welcome that feedback.
We've got a note in the chat bar: different understanding of project or initiative and objectives. And Carolyn's saying lots. In a competitive financial services culture. Yeah.
I'll go off mute and be brave. Especially as a student, it was people having different workloads and giving their time, less time to the team's goals than the rest of the teamwork. You know, there's always one that doesn't pull their weight. Maybe they're really pulling their weight on another project they're doing.
That's true. Yeah, and that comes back to their personal agenda. They're focused on something perhaps they're more comfortable with, but to the detriment of other teams where they're not seen to be pulling their weight. They may think they are pulling their weight, but that's where the misalignments are happening. Any other comments in chat? I can't see the chat, unfortunately.
Oh, there's another one from Marcy. Misinterpretation is huge as our communication is weak.
Yes.
Communication being key.
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, I'm going to continue on, and if there's any other comments people want to put in chat or talk at any time, please do let us know. But I think you're getting the idea. So I'm just going to make I've made a quick list of the impact of team misalignment, and some of these may resonate more than others with you. It can cause confusion, frustration, conflicting decisions happening and actions, inefficiencies and ineffectiveness, as well as mistrust. And it can waste time, money, opportunity, diminish productivity, demotivated people, conflicts, as we just talked about, reduced performance, and indeed unintended results, such as I put here, delays in getting approvals and decisions. People say yes as well, but there's nothing that happens. You know, there's so many disconnects that can happen between levels as well, with functions and geographic regions. So let's add on to that currently our virtual teams, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So we've based some of our work, actually all of our work, on research that has been done on teamwork. Back in 1972, the focus was on social constructionism and language and having shared realities and interpretations and beliefs. Moving to 2010, the research was around team effectiveness, and there was a lot of research around psychological safety, trust in each other, task cohesion, and mutual commitments, group potencies and having confidence in your team, and the interdependence of relying on your team. Moving up to 2016, more focus on neuroscience. And this is where research was identifying conscious assumptions, unconscious assumptions, and make up stories. People were making up stories. Just a year later, research was identifying the workplace conflict to be that 80% of conflicts are caused by those made up stories. And then just in 2019, research on collaboration identified that virtual teams are 2.5 times more likely to perceive mistrust, incompetence, broken commitments, and bad decision making. So the recent research on virtual team indicates that people are less likely to tolerate mistakes. People's biases come out when working virtually. Little to no opportunity to reflect is no time to reflect is being allowed except when they're participating in some kind of team analysis. So prevalent in this data is tolerance of mistakes. And the research on virtual teaming indicates that people are less likely to tolerate mistakes, and their biases, their personal biases, come out when working virtually. So there's no opportunity to reflect unless such a tool such as we're mentioning a team analysis can happen. And people are finding it much harder to find positive intent in people when they're working virtually.
Okay. Now, this type of intolerance can be mitigated by paying attention to things like diversity and inclusion. And certainly in 2021, that part of the secret sauce in the idea of alignment is diversity and inclusion. So this is what we're going to really dig into today for the most of the rest of today's session. And we're going to give you this activity to help you to think about perspective and how that relates to diversity and inclusion. And the nice thing about this activity is it can be easily tailored to your own group. If it's something that appeals to you and you think is useful, you can tweak it a little bit to use with your own teams and your own organization. But just to go over what's on the slide here, some of the best practices in teams and diversity and inclusion are things like being aware of unconscious bias. This is something that is very out there in cultural discourse today, being able to communicate the importance of that awareness of your biases and managing those biases, and doing check-ins with your team to assess where they're at with things like implicit bias. There's lots of tools online that you can find to check in on things like implicit bias on race and gender and sexuality and so on. But so let's talk about diversity, the visible and the invisible. When we're thinking about what makes human beings different, there's lots of things above the surface that are easy to see and easy to perceive. But then a lot of that subtext is below the surface. So the things that make us us and affect that framework that we have about how we perceive the world, those things are very hard to see. And unless you get to know your colleagues at work really, really well, those things can be difficult to understand, and you may not even know that they're there. And then we can go to the next slide. In the same vein, the same type of principles apply in an organization. Working for your organization, you can easily find things like your corporate vision statement and your corporate goals, and your policies are probably available through HR. You can go to your about page on your corporate site and easily see some of these things like procedures and shared values. But what is it beneath the surface that really constitutes how you work together and what that corporate culture is that you work within? As Sheila was saying, those stories that circulate can really have an impact on how people perceive their work environment and how they think about their organization. I know when I was working at Smart Technologies, there were lots of different, I was always interested to see these narratives that would circulate in the building. There were probably about 500 people working in my building at the time. And I would go to a meeting and I'd hear this story being developed about, here's why, the new smartboard is kind of buggy. It's because we haven't done this as much user experience testing as we should have. And we're releasing too many new products too fast or something like that. And then a few weeks later, you'd go to another meeting with a completely different set of people and you'd hear like a different version of this narrative. And these are the things that people chat about over lunch in the cafeteria or at the coffee shop or whatever. And it creates that milieu of the corporate narrative that is beneath the surface. It's that subtext of what's actually visible. And if you've worked in a large organization, you can probably relate to that. Okay. And on a more, excuse me, on a more individual level, of course, those thoughts that you have inside your own little brain, by the time they get over to the brain of the person that you're speaking with, they're bound to be interpreted in a slightly different way. The odds of that thought that you have coming across in exactly an accurate way to the person that you're speaking with are so very slim, because they go through all of these layers of meaning and everyone interprets information according to their own context. And, it depends on what sort of background they have and their values and all the experiences that they have. So there's lots of opportunities to create that fog of misalignment. Okay. I have done exercises on perspective like we're going to do today with a lot of different groups. I was teaching this type of exercise to a group of engineers at the University of Calgary. And we just kind of did this fun exercise on perspective and trying to look at the world from someone else's perspective. And one of the engineers came up to me afterwards and he says, this was so useful because I go to meetings all the time and I'm with people who have the same information, they work in the same department, have the same training. And I walk in with my opinion and I sit down at the meeting and I realize that other people have completely different views. And it kind of comes as a shock. And so being able to sit down and take the time to think from different perspectives can be a really useful thing. And that's what we're going to do today. So this just gets back to that idea of not asking people to align by thinking the same thoughts and in the same way, because honestly, that's impossible. It's more about building bridges between people who have those fundamental differences of perspective. So we're going to do a little taste test of this secret sauce that we're going to call this combination of three things: perspective and diversity and inclusion. So we're going to do a little activity. We're going to, in a couple of minutes, we're going to put you into breakout rooms and get you to chat about this and think about life from a different perspective. So what I'm going to do is ask you to imagine that for the next 20 minutes or so, you are Maria. This is you. This is a picture of you for the next 20 minutes. You're about 32 years old. You work for a medium-sized company in Calgary, and you're a little bit of a rock star. You're in your own department. You have a great reputation for being a leader, and yet you're a team player. You're very enthusiastic about your job and your company. So imagine that this is you. This is Maria. What's your background? You speak Italian, you speak English, you speak Spanish, you've got an MBA, you've got a degree in international relations. You're a pretty accomplished person. And you're ambitious and you're very enthusiastic about your work. Okay, so that's you. I'm going to give you a little scenario now. So imagine that this company that you work for in Calgary is expanding. They're opening a new office in Milan, which as Maria, you find this very exciting. Your team has been tasked with organizing the opening of this new office. And this is going to involve like a splashy celebration, which you're going to invite the new people who are going to be working for your organization in Milan. You're going to invite some of the external stakeholders, people from the business community in Milan. It's going to be quite an event. And as Maria, you find this very exciting. So what happens is you're called into a meeting. And your manager is explaining how all this is going to pan out. So we can, there we go. And your manager announces in front of your team that you and one of your colleagues And let's just say that this is your colleague on the left-hand bottom side there. And you and your colleague have been asked to plan and host this event. So this means the two of you are going to be traveling to Milan a couple times to get everything organized. The event is set to take place at the end of August. Now, your colleague has not had a leadership role before, but you really like this colleague. He's game for everything. He's got a great sense of humor, very high energy, really smart, and you work together really well. So you think this is going to go just great. So at this meeting, your manager explains that the event is scheduled for August, and they give you some information on health and safety guidelines, which seems maybe a little bit vague, but you figure, oh, well, we'll get the details later. It'll all work out. Ultimately, you're thrilled. You think this is fantastic. So after the meeting ends, you go to catch up with your colleague because you want to chat about this. You're all excited, and you discover that your colleague is like headed for the front door. And you run after him and you finally catch up to him outside the building and you go, hey, what is happening? What's going on? He's kind of upset. He says, I can't believe that this is happening. I can't believe that I've been asked to participate in this. And I'm just stunned. I'm not on board with this. I don't even know what to say. And for the rest of the day, he barely speaks to you or the rest of the team. And it is a tough day. So that is our scenario. And you are this Maria character. So what we're going to do for this little activity is we're going to try to figure out what is going on with your colleague. Who is this person? What is making him tick right now? Why is he so resistant to this opportunity that you think is so fantastic? So we're going to, how many people have we got here actually in our group? I think we've got 9.
Rosemary is going to put people into 2 different breakout rooms.
Okay, so we'll go into 2 different breakout rooms. So what you're going to do is we're going to give you this link to a Google Jamboard page. I don't know if you guys are familiar with how Google Jamboard works.
Do you have it?
Let me just grab the link here.
I've got it.
Do you? Okay. So you can see that link in the chat bar. If you want to click through to that, if you want to put that into your browser and click through to that page, and we can just pull up the Jamboard to show you what it looks like here.
There's not too many people, actually. We could stay together if you like. It's up to you, Jane.
Let's go into 2 groups. It'll probably be easier to chat if they're
That's true.
a little smaller. Do you want to pull up the Jamboard? Okay, so if you have any trouble, sorry?
Should I do the rooms now or?
No, not quite yet. I'm just going to explain how this works. So let us know in the chat or whatever if you have any trouble accessing the Jamboard. Oh, I forgot to ask at the beginning if people are using computers or phones. If you're on your phone, this might be a little trickier, but I can see that Farine can access it.
That's great.
Excellent. So what I've done is I've set up these little categories here, like personality, culture, race and beliefs, values, just to give you some ideas for things to think about in terms of the factors that might cause your colleague to react this way to this, what you see as a great opportunity. So you can think about things like age and gender and health, the personal circumstances, and then anything to do with work, like attitudes towards work, what goals they might have, relationships with people at work, that sort of thing. So these are just categories to get you guys started on factors to consider. And the way that Google Jamboard works, as you can see, Sheila's going to click on this sticky note here, and then you can type in your idea that for what one of the characteristics of your colleague, and then you can just drag it under the appropriate column there. Nobody's going to get too fussed about how this is all organized. You can just feel free to jot down ideas and put them on there. And then if anyone wants to attach a picture, because I know some people are more visual, you can click on add image, and you can go to like Google image search is kind of a good one. If you click on, yeah, and then you can just type in like whatever, office or work or whatever, and it'll bring up a whole bunch of pictures. And if you just click on the picture you want and insert, then you can like resize it or whatever, and you can put it wherever you want to on the page. And if we run out of space, we can probably just create a new frame too. Oh, we've got a raised hand from Carolyn. What can we do for you, Carolyn?
Just a quick question, Jane, you might be getting to it, sorry. Are we speculating on each of these areas, or are we to suggest steps to find out the information? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I am asking you to speculate. This is a bit of a creative exercise. So create your own character portrait of your colleague. You can give him a name. You can imagine what he might look like. But yeah, I'm not asking, there's no right or wrong here. It's just you speculating on who this person might be. And there could be, 20 different versions of this person that could be completely appropriate. It's just to get you thinking about which of these factors would relate to this person, and what personality traits are relevant here. What might cause this person to react negatively to what you see as a great opportunity? Does that answer your
Jane,
question, Carolyn?
Oh, sorry. I was going to add to that. Farine asked, are we assessing the character of the male who doesn't want to be on the project, or the female who is excited about it?
Sorry, I'm asking you to assess the male colleague that we have not named. So you or Maria, you're all excited, and it's up to you to figure out why your colleague, who is the man sitting at that table, is not excited. Yeah, that's right. Okay, and sorry, Carolyn, did I answer your question fully?
Yes, that was good. The only second part of that, are we to do the full meal deal all the way across, or just pick one of the departments that we should comment on?
Oh, you can do as many as you want. You don't have to focus on one in particular. Try to come up with like 3 or 4 in different categories. But if you think of something that doesn't fit with those categories, just put it down. Those are just kind of my cues to help you think about this. So this is kind of like a brainstorming session. So any thoughts you have on what makes this guy tick, then you should just pop them into the Jamboard here. Okay, any other questions about how this is going to work before we slot you into your breakout rooms? And Sheila and I will probably pop into a couple rooms just to see how you guys are doing. And we'll probably take we'll sort of keep an eye on the Jamboard to see how you guys are doing, but I'm assuming this will take like between 5 and 10 minutes, maybe 7 or 8 minutes or something like that. And then we'll bring us back and we'll just see what you guys thought about this process.
So we're ready now?
Yeah, I don't see any questions. So let's put people into the breakout rooms now.
Okay.
And we'll see you back here in a few minutes. Gary, you okay there and getting into a breakout room? Maybe he's just stepped away.
I think I can get him in. Did you want to join the room and I can just wait for him to?
Sure.
Okay, Jane, I'll move us along on the slide.
Okay.
Do you want me to put the Jamboard up?
Yeah, let's take a look at the Jamboard here for a minute. We've got some really interesting things here.
Yep. I wonder if I can make it slightly bigger. Can you see it okay?
I think you just need to share your screen.
Oh, I thought I had. That's interesting.
It probably closed because you went in the breakout room.
Yeah.
Chunk.
There we go. All right. Is everyone back, Rose?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just throw this open to you. We've got some really interesting things here. Lots of stuff under personality, like afraid of change. They may have religious beliefs under culture, race, and beliefs. has never done a project like this before. We've got lots. Carol, I was in a group with Carolyn and she said, Jane, you have no list of emotions here. So I added the emotion category because we do have a lot of notes on emotions. Family commitments, aging parents. Oh, that's interesting. Can't be out of town. He doesn't like change and surprise. Likes to be prepared. Would have liked to have been asked by his boss first. Oh, that's a great point. Having that announced in a meeting isn't necessarily comfortable for everyone. So just what were you guys' thoughts as you did this exercise? How, did you find it easy, or did you find it complicated, or was it like clear to you who this person was, or just any comments on your process? Feel free to just turn on your mics.
Or use the chat.
Or use the chat.
For me, it was a very comfortable process. I understood what was happening, and it did help focus my mind in a different way than I was expecting. So I found it helpful in that way.
Did you find it easy to picture this colleague and figure out what he was like?
Yes, yes. Of course, you have to speculate a lot, but
Yeah.
The thoughts started flowing pretty quickly.
Oh, good. Yeah, we've got tons of ideas here. Marcy on chat is saying, I found it clear as I deal with it here at my work. Oh, interesting. Well, feel free to expand on that in the chat bar there, Marcy. Any other general comments about the process and what you thought it was like?
Actually, I thought of another item, and actually it probably makes sense because um, especially with COVID, Milan was one of the heavily hit areas, where a town very close to Milan was decimated with COVID in the early days.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it may be a fear of going to that area. I mean, I know I would have. I mean, I love Italy, but I would certainly have second thoughts going to Italy anytime in the immediate future, for sure.
Very good point.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe the colleague is older than Maria, or has different health issues, or has elderly parents. But yeah, that ties into both fear and health too, for sure. Okay, well, did you feel like there's one of the questions I was going to ask you, did you feel like you nailed the character analysis? Because this is like an exercise in looking at the world from someone's perspective, but is it possible to just like nail this person?
Because there's too many unknowns.
There are lots of, yeah. Like you guys are speculating, but even I think as you were speculating, you probably realized that there's lots of unanswered questions here.
Yeah, I was thinking, taking this to a practical level, Jane, how dangerous it could be to speculate before you talk to the person. I know that's outside the scope of this exercise, but the very fact that you look at the character that I've set up and you go to the next row and somebody else has got a whole other character, if you will, like avatar or whatever it is, you can see they don't mesh. So everybody's got different already preconceived thoughts. So that said something to me.
Yeah, so that's telling us a couple of things. Everyone has preconceived notions. We're making certain assumptions about the person, and I've asked you to do that. But it also says that there's a lot of different possible explanations for why this person is behaving this way. And one of the things that we can think about is just being curious and talking to people and trying to find out why they are responding in a certain way. And I think it's just good to know that there's so many different explanations, lots of different things to do with everything from health to personality to attitudes towards work to just the emotions that they're feeling at the time that can contribute to why people feel differently about things at work than you do. And it seems really basic, but it's a really good thing to keep in mind at work. Okay, I feel like we're kind of running a little bit towards the end here. Sheila, should we just sort of move on at this point? Okay, let me just pull up my own version here. So thank you for doing that. I think that you guys did a fantastic job of coming up with ideas around what makes this colleague tick and thinking about a lot of different possible explanations for why he responded differently to Maria in that particular situation.
Jane, it's really interesting when you talk about biases. I don't think anybody identified a possibility that he doesn't want to report to a woman on a project. It just occurred to me, that in some, spaces is an issue. Fortunately, not so much. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Nobody pulled that one out. I just thought of it now.
Yeah, it could be a gender hierarchy related issue there. That's a good point.
And culture.
Yeah, depending on what culture the colleague comes from, that could have an impact. We talked in our breakout room a little bit about cultural differences and anxiety around going to a place like Italy. Do you know the language? How do you feel about that culture? Maybe there are cultural conflicts with the colleague's own original culture too. Yeah, so I mean, one thing that this tells you is that the fog is really thick and it's tough. And it's so easy to interpret things in different ways and have assumptions about people like your colleague, and that we do have these implicit biases that direct us in a certain way. And curiosity is such a great tool to use to just talk to people and find out why they're thinking the way that they are. But it's also great to just realize that there is all that stuff beneath the surface that causes people to have a different worldview and framework at work, and that it just is all around the fog there. Okay. So when we're talking about team alignment, and I guess the question is, how does team alignment relate to this idea of diversity and inclusion? And creating that atmosphere where we are open to diversity and inclusion, where we're thinking about difference is not a bad thing, but just a fact of life, and being curious and about other people, creates an atmosphere at work that is more open and respectful, and then ultimately fosters trust. And that is a great environment where people can really thrive and feel comfortable taking risks and doing their best work. And this all leads to things like being able to have conflict that's more constructive, being okay with having conflict at work and realizing that everybody has divergent views and that there are ways to find common ground. And this enables you to be a little bit more accepting of decisions that don't go your way and to feel heard and valued. And ultimately, when you have these attributes at work, you're more likely to get engaged and participate in the workplace. Some of the questions that come through on this tool that Sheila mentioned that we use called MirrorMirror, you can see that the evaluation questions that are sent to teams are things like, do you feel free to raise questions with your teams? Do you feel like you're operating in a positive and equal environment? Is it safe to take risks? Do you feel like your team members tolerate mistakes? Are they welcoming of differences? So these are some of the things that you can ask to really dig into the issues that teams might have with misalignment, and try to get people to work on some of these issues.
I'll just add to that this is where taking the time to assess is so key. And so that's taking some time with your people, with your teams, and to consider everybody and where they're coming from, and asking these types of questions so that they are aware of it. And if you have an independent person doing it, it could be from human resources, anybody outside of your team, another trusted advisor that can help you to give you some independent thinking and that feeling of safety in asking the questions, in providing responses, that they're not going to always be a finger pointing going on, and then providing the information in a consolidated way such as this means that nobody's pointing fingers, but they're seeing where there are disconnects, where there are gaps, and then it's facilitating a discussion through that to understand how can we best overcome these challenges that we've just identified and these gaps that we've just identified. Because as we talked about earlier, misalignments can cause all sorts of problems with projects, with teams, and with people working together. You might wonder, why did so-and-so disappear? Why did they leave? They had their reasons, but they can't express them personally to everybody. So having a method in place where there is an opportunity to express oneself and articulate what's going on is very key and important. So that's where tools such as this can be very useful. You can develop them yourselves as well, depending on your organization. So that concludes our presentation. We help our clients to work better with others. And so please do tell us if we can help you, if you've got any questions about what we've just gone through. And we'd at this point, in fact, just like to open up and ask any feedback and also any other questions, or if there's anything that you'd like us to go back over. Over to you.
Perhaps just a general comment. I love the exercise in terms of 2 team members. One of the things that came up in our group that we didn't chat about in the debrief is the phenomenal failure of the manager to have that conversation up front and to allow that kind of an environment to be created and to put 2 team members in such an awkward situation. So I like all of the follow-up you had, which really is about how does a manager understand these things and do what is necessary to help avoid those kinds of situations developing in the first place. But if they do develop, giving them tools to help them work through it.
Yes.
And it's possible that the manager just assumed that everyone would feel really positively about it and wouldn't feel a need to discuss it privately. But yes, obviously it's the kind of conversation that would have been better to have privately. That's a great point. Any other questions from anyone or comments? Thank you for doing that exercise. You had some really great, it is speculation, but it's the speculation process that can be kind of enlightening. So thank you for doing that. That was great.
And this is being recorded, so if you want to reflect back on it afterwards, you can just let Rosemary know, or in fact, it'll be posted on the website, will it, Rose?
Yes,
Thank you.
and our YouTube channel.
We hope you found this useful.
Yeah, great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.